Gaikoku Gamers.
Bite-sized.
Welcome to Gaikoku Gamers. I'm Darryl Benson, and I'm here to talk to you guys today about Destiny. Now, you're probably like, I've heard everything there is to know about Destiny. I could care less. But I have something very important. And it has nothing to do with this badass dirt bike helmet that I got today in the mail. Although, if you guys want me to, I'll make a review of it. But anyway, that's for a different forum altogether. Anyway, so one thing that's been really concerning, and again, sorry about no image back here, I'm just too lazy right now. One thing that's really concerning to me, since I've been playing this game and been loving it to pieces, is seeing much of the vocal internet, which means aka a vocal small majority. It's just like it is in politics and everything else in life. The people that complain the most, you'd think would be the minority, or the majority, but end up being in the minority. Anyway, but there's this huge vocal group just dissing the game left and right. And you can tell that they haven't played it. Or at least haven't played it since beta. And it's really, really unfortunate because, you know, if you're a gamer that won't play something but pass judgment on it, A, I don't want to know you, and B, that's just bad. You know, just as much as a game can be overhyped, a game can also be wrung to the dirt, and only years later do people realize that it was a great game. I can't tell you how many countless games like didn't sell well, for instance, just because of bad professional reviews, but they ended up being some of my favorite and other people's favorite games of all time years later. That's underappreciated. And you know, now with the power of the internet, unfortunately, everyone has a voice, me included, but most people are I shouldn't say most, many people are not as level-headed. And it's really concerning because I'd like to know why. And this is a few things I can think of. I think there's a group of people, first off, who are Nintendo fans, who aren't necessarily jaded so much about Destiny, but just frankly are just jaded in general, because as much as I love my Wii U over... Where am I? Where are you? There it is. As much as I love my Wii U, and it's a fantastic console, you know, Nintendo did fuck up at the beginning of this generation. They marketed it to casuals who weren't there anymore. And while it's great that, you know, Miyamoto and other Nintendo company have come over and said, you know, screw the casuals, we're going all pro, I don't think the Wii U will ever really be what it could have been with such a bad start. And it wasn't like PS3, oh, the price is too high, but everything else is good. There were other issues with this system, and it's really, you know, it's funny that I admit that because it's also my favorite next-gen system. So before, you know, anyone starts bashing on me, I really hope that people understand I love the Wii U. I think it's a fantastic console. I don't like what it's called, and I could do with a few more games, but the system itself and the idea therein of the system, I think is pretty cool. Much better in my opinion than a PlayStation 4 or Xbox One in many ways, but not all. Everyone has its strength, right? I just prefer an all gaming console like the Wii U than an all entertainment system per se. However, they're not getting a lot of games. And when you're sitting over there looking at, you know, your Wii U kind of collecting dust just because you're not wanting to play Mario Kart that day, it's unfortunate. And I think there's a lot of people hating on that game right there. Number two, I think there's a huge group of people who are not liking it, not liking Destiny because it's also on PlayStation. You have to understand, you know, and this goes for anyone. This goes for Nintendo IPs, this goes for Microsoft IPs, this goes for even Sony IPs, you know, especially Sony IPs. You know, people get really possessive about those exclusives that generally were found on previous consoles. So when, like, a developer changes teams, it could be detrimental. Now, Rare is a good example. Now, to be fair, they did a lot of the damage themselves, but Cameo was not a bad game, not by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it was started on the 64, and that was back in Rare's good years. And now don't misquote me, but I think it was one of the last. No, Viva Pinata was, but it was in that last batch of games that the original founders of Rare actually made. But no one bought it because Rare fans who were Nintendo fans were so pissed at Rare they didn't want to fucking even touch the games anymore because it was on Xbox. Then, of course, their quality suffered after the people jumped ship, and we know the rest of the story. But I think that's generally what's happening right now, is that there's a lot of Xbox fans who are generally angry. And then there's a small, albeit fairly vocal, minority of people who are ticked off that it's not for PC. The reason why I roll my eyes is because, PC gamers have their exclusives that I wish that were on consoles, and console games have their exclusives that PC people wish they were on their PCs. And, I don't think it's fair to judge a game developer who has primarily in the past, at least since Halo, worked first on consoles and only ported it to the PC later, if ever. They were only working on Apple's before then. Like, this is like old school, Bungie, not like modern day Bungie. So I don't understand why people are ticked off about that. But that's who I think is complaining. Now we have people who are also complaining maybe since the demo. There's a whole, or the beta. But this is why I think people are complaining. And I'm trying to, and some of them I agree with, but most of them I don't. The first thing I hear all the time is that the voice work of the Ghost is horrible. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say it's like Academy Award winning type of acting here or anything, but to be fair, he is supposed to be like an artificial intelligence robot, and his voice doesn't seem to have much more inflection than any of the other robot type characters in the city that you can meet. So I think it's more him acting the character than it is his ability to voice act. That's just my point. I've seen a lot of people who like to smash this game say, oh, it's only 2 power-ups. That's stupid. For a game this size, how are there only 2 power-ups per class? Okay, it's not 2 power-ups. And if you play the game outside beta, you would know this. True, you can only have 2 power-ups equipped at one time, but there are a whole slew of power-ups that you can replace and trade off at your whim at any time. And some of the power-ups are really cool. Okay, the Hunter, for instance. I did the Warlock class during the beta, and I tried Hunter this time with the full release, and I'm actually glad I did. I actually quite like Hunter. I don't know why everybody gives her crap. But anywho, the Hunter has grenades that when they explode, makes everybody in flames, right? And that's cool. The one that replaces it is even better, in my personal opinion. Now, you can still choose the old one, and that's perfectly fine. It's not any weaker per se. It's just the style that you want, right? It's a way to customize your character. The one that it replaces on the next level down, about level 6 or 7, you get this unlocked. It's little. You throw the grenade, but then it's a bunch of floating little robots. And then when someone walks in their vicinity, they just attack the crap out of them and usually kill them. I think that's pretty cool, because what you can do is you don't have to necessarily be the best shot when you throw your grenade. You can throw it maybe between kind of you and the enemy, and then when the enemy walks over to you, then they get blasted. I also think that the amount of weapons are great. Now, this is another thing that people complained about. They're like, oh, in other games you get 80 bajillion weapons, and I don't like games that literally have me updating myself every 5 minutes. Updating equipment, updating guns, updating equipment, updating guns. They seem to have found the perfect, not too much, not too little. Like, I feel like I'm upgrading when I feel like I need to become more powerful for the areas that I'm visiting, instead of them throwing just endless crap at me. So that's my opinion. Again, it doesn't seem to match up with actual gameplay, some of these people's criticisms. It just feels like they watched some gameplay. In fact, that's another point. A lot of people are saying that this game is really boring. Now, they haven't played it, but they're just saying that because they're watching footage. Now, my counter to that is, this is not a game like Halo that, at least in a single player, is a scripted, thematic, first-person shooter with scripted events where you can have presentation and story going alongside every bloody step that you take. This is kind of like Phantasy Star Online. There's a story, but much of it is just you grinding. Now, I understand that maybe Phantasy Star Online isn't necessarily everyone's favorite game, but for me, it's actually one of my favorite games of all time. I have the GameCube version of my import cube, for instance. I love it. So to have a game that is basically Phantasy Star Online, literally, it is basically Phantasy Star Online. Like, literally Phantasy Star Online, except as a first-person shooter. In fact, that's the best way I can describe it. Really fucking amazing graphics, and you can make teams on the fly instead of like in a lobby. But basically, other than that, it's Phantasy Star Online in a first-person shooter form. How people think that's bad is beyond me, and that's another thing I want to talk about: control and fun. This game controls like no other first-person shooter, and I think I can legitimately say that because I don't like first-person shooters. I think most of them are shallow, and I think most of them are just not very fun, and it takes a lot for a first-person shooter to be fun for me. In fact, the only other first-person shooter that would be on my top 25 games of all time would be Star Wars Battlefront 2, which again may not be the perfect shooter, but it's the most fun for me. And I think a lot of people share that sentiment, or else people wouldn't want the third one so bad. This game has that level of fun. Now, the gameplay isn't at all like Star Wars Battlefront 2, but it has that same addictive quality. And people complain, oh, well, I'm watching it, doesn't look very fun. Yeah, but half the fun is controlling it. Again, it's not a theatrical type game, and you guys gotta go ahead and realize that it's kind of like watching WoW. It's gonna be boring, but playing WoW can be a lot of fun. But I can't watch people play WoW. It's yawn-inducing. It's the same type of thing. There's nothing for you to watch thematically that's going to take any interest for you. This is a gamer's game where playing it is the fun, not watching it. So let's move on to the next part. People are complaining about, oh, there's no loot, and another thing that people are really complaining about, you can't trade with other people. Now, I actually prefer this. Again, this kind of ties into what I said before about there not being 80 bajillion power-ups every 2 seconds. I like that you have to kind of work for your upgrades, and I like that you're not constantly selling just hundreds of pieces of gear. It makes each weapon that they make a little bit more meaningful than maybe Borderlands, where it's just an infinite supply of shit, and then every once in a while you get something good. Do you know what I mean? As far as the trading, I'm very glad that there's no trading. In fact, I think the only people complaining about this are people who play PC games where they make a living on trading, because all it does is screw the value up on everything, and people just try to profit off of it, and prices are jacked up. It's ridiculous. I'm very happy that the only way to sell stuff is to the system itself for money. Fantastic. Keep it like PSO. I like it a lot. Communication. Now this one I will give some slack to. I really kind of wish, in a way, that there was a better way to communicate with people other than clicking on their R stick when you're looking at them and inviting them to a game. Now, to be fair, once they're in your fire squad or in your party, you can talk to them, and that's fantastic. But, you know, if you're just kind of alongside people, you can't. Now, here's a big but. During the beta, there were some people who must have been bored after they reached level 8 and didn't have anything else better to do. And they started, like, following me around. Like, every movement I made, they just followed me around. Even in the lobby, just followed me around. And basically, my point is, even without speech, there was ways for people to troll, albeit it's much harder. Now, if they had proximity voice chat, can you imagine how much music and cursing and stuff goes on? In fact, I think that's part of the reason why I like this game so much, is I don't like first-person shooters generally because it's a bunch of 12-year-olds cursing and trying to act like they're adults, even though adults don't talk like that. I like this, and while I don't think keyboard support would be bad, although that could be spammed, but I think if they did something like Warframe, where, like, in the for sale section in Warframe, there's certain keywords that it looks for, and then you're banned as soon as you say one of those words, at least for a temporary amount of time. I think keyboard support for proximity keyboard support would be fine. But, yeah, no, I don't think voice support works unless you're in your fire squad. I think it would really ruin the atmosphere of the game. So the people who are asking for voice chat, please just stop. Please think of the implications. This is not EA presentation. This is how it would work in fantasy world. You're talking about real life. In real life, unfortunately, most people are dicks. Do you really want to ruin the atmosphere of Destiny? I don't think so. Last but not least, you know, the game's selling really well. They just announced today that they sold $500 million worth of digital/shipped games. Now, of course, that's only going to go up, so, you know, pretty damn good. Now, of course, the naysayers were out and they're like, oh, it's just because of hype, blah, 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 blah. There are plenty of hyped games that didn't sell well. If this game was really that bad, people would not be buying it. Now, I'm not saying there haven't been hyped games that didn't sell, even if they sucked, but the majority of people are fairly well educated. And I think the beta really helped. I think the interest was sinking like a sieve before the beta came out. I don't think they would have sold very much if the beta didn't come out. But I think the beta proved to a lot of people that, you know, this game was something to really keep your eye on. Now, I know I said last thing, but there is one more thing. I just want to note that no one's complaining about this, but I just figured I'd let you guys know who have not played the game yet. The graphics have improved notably from the beta. I was not expecting this because, you know, MMO style games typically don't have the best of graphics. I mean, Phantasy Star Online definitely didn't have the best Dreamcast graphics of its day, although it was still fun. And I was fine with how it looked in the beta, and I was willing to compromise, but it wasn't a next-gen game look-wise, in my personal opinion. Now it is. Lighting is significantly better. There's more shadows, and they're more dynamic, and they're clearer and higher resolution. Speaking of which, textures are much higher resolution. Bump mapping is more prevalent. It's not one of those things where, like, if I showed you a snapshot, you'd be like, whoa! But it's one of those things where as soon as you start playing, you're like, wow, this is much better. And even my buddies who were playing, when I said, what do you think of the graphics versus beta? And they all said, oh my god, yeah, it's a lot better. They definitely improved some stuff. So, lighting is much, much, much better, seriously. But seriously, the game is freaking great. And, you know, if you haven't tried the retail version, you're doing yourself a disservice. I mean, basically, let me just put it this way. I'm not saying that there aren't genuine people out there who don't like it. Of course there are. There's people who don't like every game. Or I don't mean every game, but, like, there are people out there who don't like one of literally any game out there. No game has no critics, okay? But I really wish people would just try it instead of criticizing it before they actually, you know, bought it and played it. And I don't mean the beta version, because the beta version wasn't anything like this, really, in many respects. This is much bigger, much more in depth, and much more fun to play, frankly. So I really implore people to go ahead and try it. I'm not saying it's for you, but if my description has you thinking that maybe it is for you, then awesome. But primarily I'm seeing a bunch of people who are just trying to cause waves as some sort of, like, petty vice against the company in order to try to unconvincingly affect their sales out of some personal agenda. And then there's a stupid people. There's a guy on one of my social media, private social media, not for Gaikoku Gamers, I'm not insulting any of our viewers. One of my private social media programs, where the guy returned his copy of Destiny because he didn't know that he had to pay for online. And to be fair, it wasn't even like an Xbox One. It was an Xbox 360. Like, everyone in the world knows about Xbox Live. It's been out since, like, what, 01, 02, something like that? Please. Really? And that's the thing, man. It's just a bunch of stupid people. Again, you're more than welcome to not like the game. If it's not your cup of tea, great. Come at me with actual criticism. Nicely toned criticism. Just like me. Speak your mind, and it's cool. Hey, maybe this isn't your type of game. Whatever. It's not like it's going to affect me any. But, you know, I really wish people just give it a shot. So, I'm already running into 20 minutes, so I'm going to cut it right here. Welcome again back to you guys who have been taking a hiatus. I notice our population has increased on our website since we've been doing the videos, so thank you for coming back. We've been doing really, really well hit-wise and everything, so we really appreciate your viewership. Please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. The subscriptions really help us out. And until then, I'm Darryl Benson with another episode of Bite-Sized Gamers. Bite-Sized Gamer? Bite-Sized... Fuck it. Shit. Lots of shit. Welcome to Lots of Shit. Goodbye.